Glad you're with us. Want to talk to you a little bit about a couple of ways how to forgive and also maybe how to reconcile. And those things aren't the same things. I want to talk about some myths that are with forgiveness as well. But before that, I want to talk to you about a story. Let me know if this sounds familiar at all. Anything of this sounds familiar. It's Christmas time, and there's this large dysfunctional family, and they're busy trying to get everything together. And one boy in the family, his youngest in the family, he always consistently feels overwhelmed, overlooked, undervalued, never cared for. He also believes that he's blamed for far too many things. And the last straw of this is all the family's over. It's the holiday time, it's Christmas time, and they're about to go on this big trip. And one of his older brother kind of gets him in trouble for something, and ultimately the younger boy is blamed for it, and he is sent off to go stay in the attic and just stay there. And so he's blamed. That was the final straw. And in his anger and his being upset, he wishes that he's just left alone, that they would just all disappear. And he wakes up, and surprisingly, to his delight, it seems as if his wish came true. He was finally home alone. For a few hours, the boy does everything that he wanted to do behind a mountain of ice cream. He says, "Guys, I'm eating junk food and watching rubbish. You better come out and stop me." And this seems to be going well, and he loves it, and everything's good. After a few hours come to pass, he realizes he's lonely, and this sets in. But unbeknownst to him, the boy is in a house where there were some burglars that were casing the place for quite a while. They were watching it, waiting for no one to be there so they could take advantage when it's at the most vulnerable time. And they go into this epic battle, and the boy, of course, is finally on top, and he's in the fight of his life against these two hardened criminals. And the boy ends up on top and defeats the criminals, likely because of the PG rating, the family-friendly atmosphere. And yes, this is the story of the movie classic, the holiday Christmas classic of Home Alone. One of my personal favorites, and many of us that kind of grew up in that time when it came out. But it's a great movie in terms of it's just fun. But I think it also speaks a lot about some elements of truth with us as well, thinking about forgiveness and all the things that entail with that. Because often we get offended and we just want to be alone. And we experience some short-term freedom from being alone, while it leaves us open for the enemy, our real enemy, to come in. And Jesus never gave his followers the option not to forgive, but Jesus commanded us to forgive. So just like Kevin McAllister, he didn't want to forgive. He just had bitterness. He just wanted to be left alone. Like, only if they would be out of my life, things would be better. But ultimately, the unforgiveness left him in a very vulnerable place. But here's what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 14 and 15. "For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive the others your trespasses, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses." And then further in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul reaffirms this, speaking to the Ephesians in chapter 4, verse 32. He says, "Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God forgave you." So Jesus, and carried on throughout the entire New Testament, it's not an option. It's not a feeling. It's not, I got to wait till I get that feeling. I got to wait till I'm over it. He says you got to forgive quick, because when you don't forgive, it leaves you vulnerable to your real enemy. But now I want to talk about what are some myths of forgiveness, because so many things are intermingled and intertwined, and that's one of the things we want to do here at Requip Ministries, to equip the church, help you out, to be a supplement for you. There's some myths of forgiveness. The first myth of forgiveness is it says what they did is okay. Because a lot of us, we say, I don't want to forgive because it makes it seem as if what they did to me was okay. Now, that's a myth. It's a myth of forgiveness. It has nothing to do with forgiveness. Forgiveness is our action on releasing somebody else. The second thing is the pain will go away if I forgive. And if you have this pain, if this feeling of being upset comes up, well, maybe you didn't really forgive them. Well, that's a myth because our feelings have nothing to do with the choice. Sometimes our feelings, and almost always, our feelings are false. Our feelings deceive us, so we have to make a choice to forgive. And the third myth of forgiveness is the relationship will be the same. If you've really forgiven, the relationship will go back to the same, but that's a myth because it's not always going to be the same. And quite often, there should be some degree where you got to build back up to where that relationship would be the same. But your forgiveness has no bearing on what the relationship is, because forgiveness is you releasing anger and all that from the other person. A myth about forgiveness is it basically says, well, you forgive everybody and you should just let people mistreat you. That's a myth because forgiveness, it doesn't mean you open up all your guardrails and you release all your boundaries and let people mistreat you. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is saying what you did was wrong, and I might keep boundaries. I might even put more boundaries in because you proved who you really are, but I forgive you. I don't hold it against you. I'm not going to count this wrong. I'm not going to always bring it up. I'm not going to always throw this in your face. I forgive you. I really do. But I'm going to have proper boundaries to protect myself, my family, and other people around me if you show yourself to be untrustworthy. But now there's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Some of the times those things, those words, you say forgiveness and they think it automatically means reconciliation. Reconciliation is where the relationship is back to normal, everything's good. It's almost like it never happened again, and you have this reconciliation. It's not the same thing. Forgiveness is a recognition that in both word and deed, that you are also guilty before God, and you choose to release bitterness towards the other person. And reconciliation is an agreement, in a sense, between both parties where you restore relationship to a healthier one. And I want to show you a passage where Jesus talks about, man, you should attempt reconciliation. It takes both people, so you can't just, it's not a choice. It could be a choice for yours where you're going to attempt it. You're always going to forgive. But reconciliation takes both parties coming together, and what he says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 23 and 24. So if you are offering your guilt at the altar, and remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift before the altar and go first be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. He's basically saying if you're going to go worship God, I mean, you can't even have a proper worship with God if you know somebody has something against you, or you have something up against somebody else. If you haven't attempted to put that olive branch out there to say, I forgive you, and I want this relationship to be back to normal, and you put it out there, that's all you can do is put it out there. It's up to the other person to say, no, you're absolutely right, and I'm sorry for the things I've done. Let's work these things out. Let's come back together. But it takes both people, and then putting it all together with a passage that sometimes we have to leave it as far as it depends on us to live peaceably. And sometimes this is where you might lead it in Romans chapter 12, 17 and 18. Repay no evil for evil, but forgive. Thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all, if possible. So as far it depends on you, live peaceably with all. So we see there's some myths in forgiveness. Reconciliation, forgiveness, not the same thing. We're commanded to forgive. That's a command because it only depends on us. Reconciliation, we're commanded to make the attempt, but it depends on both people. I hope this helps.